Hello everyone, this is Ben Ryder from the Academy of Gaming, Film and Animation, and what we're looking at today is how to rig and animate our chest that we've done in the first assignment. So by now you should have made your chest. It should have an inside all textured and ready to go, and what we're going to look at now is how we can create these bones that you're seeing here to help us with the animation. Now, it might seem a little bit fidgety and everything, and again I'm coming from Maya to Blender, from Blender to Maya to Blender, so it's a little bit shaky, but it's the same principle in both programs, and that's this idea that you have the static mesh itself that we've just created inside of Blender or Maya as a 3D model that has been UV unwrapped and textured, and now we're going to add these bones to it to allow us to animate it. And the strategy behind this is that when we later then come to importing it into Unreal, we have a skeletal animation, which is just a little bit easier to control, and it translates better from one program to the next. So that's why we're sort of doing that. It's also a really good introduction into rigging for later when you're rigging characters or vehicles. So it's a good way to start learning now with something simple, so that later on we can start when we get to characters, you already have a pretty good idea about how these bones work. Now, we are only really going to look at the bones for the assessment and then keyframing in those bones, but we can have a quick look at constraints and how we can use IK constraints and a few other constraints just to make things easier, but we're not expecting you to do that in this assessment. We really just want to get you to a point where you can rig these bones up. So again, just to sort of reiterate, so we have the bones here and up here in object mode with this skeleton selected. If I go down here to pose mode, I can now move and keyframe these items. So when we talk about keyframe, we're talking about this timeline down here, and you'll need to get to layout because you won't see it in the modeling one. And from here, we can start actually animating it. So one of the ones that we've got just here is everything is just this latch opening up here. So if I click on the skeleton itself and then go to pose mode and I select that bone, you'll see here that it's got these two keyframes here, one where it is closed and one by the end where it is open. So once I've got that, I can then go down to this next bone here and then first of all keyframe it by pressing I. I'm going to keyframe all of its values, its location, rotation and scale, and I'm going to move all the way to the end to where I want it by the end of this animation, which is the open position. So I'm going to press R and then X and then rotate it to an open position like so, and then I'm going to press I again and location rotation. So it's really important that I position this little tracker on my timeline before I put these in. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to do this from scratch now to sort of make it, sort of show you how you can rig up these bones and parent them to the actual object. And then later we'll get into how do you animate and make an idle, an open and a close. Though that should be pretty self-explanatory once you have the rig in place. So I'm going to go open up my demo rig, and that's this one here. I'm actually just going to delete that rig and then we're going to go from scratch. So I would encourage you when you're doing rigs to just use the orthographic views, both in Blender and Maya. It helps out a lot to be able to position them correctly. So how do we create those rig objects? First of all, in Blender, we press Shift A and we go down here to armature. And it's going to create just a little bone there. If I go to my wireframe, I can see I have this bone here. So we're now going to go into edit mode to edit this bone. And I'm going to, this is the arm, and then they refer to this as the joint here. So I'm just going to press G and then Z and then just bring that down there. I always like to have one in the center here because that, when you bring it into Unreal, will be where you're positioning it in the world. And it also keeps things straight. It keeps things, you know, up and down on the X and the Y and the Z axis, which makes it a lot easier to navigate and position in the world. If you go straight for the angled one and that's your root bone, then it can cause all kinds of problems. So I always start with that one there. And then while still in edit mode and going back to my orthographic view here, I'm going to press E again, just like we would to extrude an object. And I'm going to go right up here to the hinge. And I'm going to try and position it as close as I can to that hinge. Remember, the bone isn't necessarily where it is logically, but more about where you want it to bend. So by positioning it here on the hinge, that means that when it opens up, it's going to be on that hinge, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to press E again, and then move it all the way over to this other hinge for the latch. And then I'm going to press E again to go down, and then just at the bottom here. I'm going to keep it at the bottom there just to make it easier to get, because if we have this switch so it's not X-ray, then we're going to need to have a way in which we can still access this bone even if we can't see it. So having it just poke out the end here helps with that. I'm going to click back to this original bone here, and I'm going to go up to my Z axis look here, because I still want to make it so that you can make these handles move as well, so we can get some of that secondary animation going there. So I'm going to press E and extrude it out to this point here. And then I'm going to go back to my x-axis and then have it extrude again, as I said, at the bottom here. If I hold down shift, that will sort of give me a bit more control there, but that's just about there. And then I'm just going to go back to the thing and do the exact same. Now you can use tools like symmetry tools here, but I would caution against them, and the reason is when you're using symmetry tools, you can sometimes alter the gimbal rotation. Now there's a lot of theory to talk about when it comes to the rotation axis, but generally what it means is that we want our axis points here to be the same. And sometimes when we duplicate it and use symmetry, it kind of flips over those values, and that means when you go to rotate it, you'll rotate this one this way, and then the other one will flip in the other way. And it just can wreck some of your sort of rigs and therefore your animation. So it's best just to keep it simple, don't try and be fancy, don't try and use mirror tools, and try to avoid symmetry tools if you can as well. So with that rigged in place, we can now talk about how do we connect this to the actual rig, because at the moment it's still free flowing. I'm moving this and the chest isn't moving with it. So I'm going to go here into object mode, and let's talk about how we can make it so this is visible. So if I have the armature selected and I go over here and I select my object properties, I can actually go here and go in front, and that's going to make it a lot easier for us to select things and parent them to it. Okay. Now the first thing I need to do is make sure that all of my parts are separate. When I was texturing it, because I wanted to get all of my UVs onto one, I combined it by going object and join, but now I need to separate it so that I can rig it individually. So to do that, I'm going to select that, press tab to go into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then press P on the keyboard and say loose parts. Basically, if something's not connected now, it will be separate. So I've got to go through now and just connect a few things up just to make sure that they're all there, because I don't want to have a bone for every individual sort of object here. I'm going to make these hinges part of the lid as well, so they move when the lid moves. So with that all selected, I'm just going to go object and join. I'm going to press H to hide to make sure there's nothing in there that would be there, and then I'm going to use this and select everything else except for the latch here. I'm going to keep that separate because that again is its own separate bone. So I'm going to go object and join. I'm going to go back here and bring back that lid. I'm going to rename it just to make things easier. We'll call that body, and this here, and go wireframe and select that last one right there and join all of those together. Cool. All right, we should now be in a pretty good position. I can see that there's a part in here that got cut away basically because it's inside, and because it's not necessarily connected, it needs to be joined up as well. So that's good that we got that one there. I'm just going to hide that one and just make sure there's nothing else. Yep, we are good to go. So now we can start parenting it. Okay, I could go through and name some of these other ones here. That I will also, this is always good to use the outliner here because it lets you see parts that you might have missed. So I'm just going to call that one latch, and that should be everything now. I don't think there's anything else in here. So I think we're ready to start parenting it to the mesh. So I'm going to start by parenting this body here to this rig bone here. So I'm going to select the mesh first, then I'm going to select the bone, go down here to to object mode and go to pose mode, select that bone, and then go up here to pose, go down here to parent, and then select parent to bone. And that's going to mean that the entire object and all of its vertices are one-to-one with the bone. So now when I move that, everything moves with that as well. Okay, good. Now I can see that the hinges actually need to be separated, so I'm just going to undo all that. If you need to, you can also, just to sort of show you how you would fix that if you had made a mistake, it couldn't undo. Let's say I have this parented, and I want to unparent it. I should just be able to select this and go parent and go down here to clear parent, and that should be just fine. And as you can see, it doesn't move anymore because I've just realized the handles I actually want to keep separate. So I'm going to go back to object mode here. I'm going to select this, just this lid here, sorry, the body here, press W, press tab to go into edit mode, press A to select all, press P, select by loops parts, and then we're going to call this one. I always go by whatever the view of the character is, and that's a habit you want to get into when you're calling left and right. It should be actors left and right, not stage left and right. So we're going to go with the handle here. I'm just going to call this one L_handle, and then we're going to select this one here and call it R_handle. Cool. That is lid. I'm going to just leave it as lid and leave that as latch, but I need to connect now everything else up. So this can be a little bit tedious, but it's best to get it right before you start animating and then realize, oh, there's parts here that I wanted connected. But it is very malleable, Blender, which is good. So we're going to join those up there. Body, what's this last part here? Of course, that one. Join, yep. Excellent. All right, that should be it now. Hopefully, that'll be the last of that. So now let's get down and parent the rest of it up. So I'm going to parent this again. I'm going to go here to, object mode, pose mode, select that, pose, parent to bone. Excellent. Now I'm going to parent this lid to this bone. Now it's important to understand here that not everything needs to be parented to every bone, and not every object needs a bone. So I'm not parenting anything to this middle bone here. I'm using that bottom one for the lid there, and I'm using these ones for the lid, this one for the lid here, and this one for the latch. I'm not actually going to use anything else. I'm not going to parent anything to this bone here. This bone's going to just be connecting, basically. So that's good there. Then I'm going to select the latch, select, again, the skeleton, go here to pose mode, select the bone, pose, parent, bone, and then object, skeleton, pose, bone, and then object, skeleton, pose, bone. Excellent. All right, so that should be it now. And just to test it, I'm going to just start selecting the skeleton just by itself, and then pose, and then rotating things in. I'll bring back the solid view, and that's looking good. That's doing right. That's doing right. Good. And oops. Excellent. So things are animating individually, but they are animating as a group as well. And now if I rumble that, yep, that's it. That's everything there. And as I move it, I don't see any parts left behind. So we are good. So that is how you rig up your chest. So now all we really need to do, if we put this back to a resting position, is start creating the animations. Now, my advice when you're working with skeletons, and there's different formats for this, is just to have one long timeline for your whole of your animations. So we'll start off with the rumble, and then I'll open it, and then I'll close it. There's a number of reasons for that. One, you can check the transition from open to close to make sure they're roughly about the same length and speed so they don't look confusing. But two, it means that you're guaranteed that this skeleton and this mesh is exactly the same. Because if you try to import multiple animations with just slightly different meshes, like let's say I just accidentally grab this and I then just accidentally move it over here, Unreal will freak out and it won't allow you to merge those animations. So you'll end up with multiple skeletons. You don't want that. So my advice is always just start animating it and then just extend your timeline and just keep animating it until you come back to your finish. So the three animations we need to do are going to be a rumble animation. So I'm going to just select all of these, press I, location, rotation, scale. So I do that again. So I press I on the keyboard, I then move it across. I'm going to make this 72. So we're going in 24 frames per second. So I'm just going to end it here at 72. And the reason I've made these two the same is because I want them to loop. When we watch this animation over and over, and if I go here and select the end just for now at least to be at 72, and I just put in small rumble there, small rumble here. And again, this isn't the best, this is just a demonstration of how you could go about this. But now as I sort of animate it here, you see it should just end where it starts, okay? And that's really what you want. So I can move these as well. I can move those across, and here I can make them really close together to make the animations like really sharp for that part and everything. So we can have, you know, a bit of a sort of sharp sort of rumble and then like a kick to it and everything else like that, you know, because we want the player to realize, hey, there's something really valuable inside of here and everything. Exaggeration is one of the principles of animation. You can be subtle with your animations if you want, it's up to you, but animating with exaggeration is always fun, and it always allows you to sort of create more expressive animations and everything, which is what we're kind of going for here. It's a stylized chest, we want it to sort of have a sort of magical, lifelike component. So we've got that, and that's a decent enough rumble, I guess. So now let's look at doing the open. So I'll just go here and extend this to 250. So now by the end of, say, about here, we want this chest to be open. So this is what we call pose-to-pose animation. I'm going to have a start pose and an end pose, and then I'm going to pose in between. Straight ahead is more of what I was just doing there, where I was just putting keyframes at random and just trying to see, you know, what I could feel out and everything. And that's always a principle that you can look at there as well. And when we look at the 12 principles of animation, definitely advise you sort of look at that and consider which one you want to use for which animations. But for this, because we need it to be at an open position, we're going to use pose to pose. So I'm just going to rotate on the x-axis here. Sorry, it's always a bit hard and wiggly to undo. I'm just going to try and go in the right direction, just so it doesn't take a shortcut and go through the chest. So with there and there, yep, that's what I want. Good. I'm actually going to copy this one because I want it to stay closed just a little bit to allow that latch to open so it doesn't glitch through there. So I'm going to copy, move it across a bit, and then paste. And now I'm going to select this, and I'm going to say, okay, here by about here, before it opens, it needs to be at an open position. So I'm going to press S and open, like so, and then press I. And then we're going to consider a bit of inertia here. If this lid is opening like this, it's probably going to bring the latch down like so. So it's thinking about that secondary animation. So it goes up and then there, and then as we get to our open position here, it's going to come to a stop and then kick down like so. So if I now start at 72 and end at 52, 152, I can now just watch this animation going through. And again, you could sort of put in a little bit more here. I feel like that keyframe there needs to be moved further back here so that it sort of starts opening up there, so it looks a little bit natural. But again, I'm not necessarily, I want to see how you come up with this yourself. This is not what I would consider to be your final animation. This is just a start to show you how to animate. I'd like you to bring in a bit of your own imagination and feeling to it. For example, you could go here, and I would highly recommend, you know, as it sort of opens up like that, maybe just sort of, you know, give it a bit of a lean forward and everything, and then, you know, as it goes back, you know, lean it back and everything just a little, just to sort of get that inertia, sort of it opening up like that, and then maybe get this one, copy, and at the end there at 152, we paste it, okay? So that's what you just want to have there. Now, if you're doing your animation, I'd expect you to now go and do the close animation as well. Easy enough, we can just go 250 and say, right, let's go copy, and maybe, doesn't need to be to 250, maybe about here, paste. So, oops. That does not seem to have done what I thought it would do, because that value there, delete keyframe, if we go here, copy keyframe, I'm just going to move it to there and just make sure I know why. It has copied it, but it's copied just the root bone and none of the other animations here. So I'm going to copy all of these and then say, yeah, 210, paste. So there it goes. And as you can see, without any sort of interruption from us, it does a very stock standard close, and it glitches through that. So you'd want to go through here and be like, okay, well, you know, again, with a bit of inertia here, this would probably be back a bit, like so, and then come down and maybe only start closing once it is in position. So I might just do a little bit before then. Yep, and so it gives a nice little click there at the end. Okay, so we have our whole animation now. So if I go down here to 0, now there's two ways we can do this. We can export this all out as one FBX, or we can, and then crop it up inside of Unreal, or we can crop it up now. So we'll look at both. I'm just going to export it out as one whole animation, and we'll talk a little bit about just some of the settings you're going to need. So I'm going to end it here at 210. And we're going to go across and we're going to say, right, let's say we need to select first our armature. So I'm going to go back out of pose mode into object mode, and I'm going to select everything. And this is really important. I'm going to hide these lights because we don't need those. Lights won't export out with this. It really is all just about the mesh, the latch, the handle, latch, lid, body, lid, and of course the armature. Okay, so with all of those selected, we want to come out here and export as an FBX file. Okay, so there's different files you can use for 3D, just like JPEGs and PNGs for 2D images, and they will have different variables. For coming into Unreal, we use FBX, which is a Maya format, but it works just as well with Unreal and with Blender as well. So we're going to go here to FBX, and we're going to see it's a couple of things that we can do here. So I've got our final FBX render from there. Obviously, I just want the armature and the mesh. And we want to go, these settings here we might change depending on what we end up getting into Unreal, because Unreal's Z is up, not Y and everything, so we'll figure that. But we'll go here to bake animation, we want to make sure of that. And yep. So we'll key all bones. We may have to change some of these, but we'll see how it comes out. So we're going to go export, and now we're going to open up that file. So just give me a second. This is in chest demo, rig, final render. Cool. So let's see how this worked out. Excellent. Okay. So I'll just show you what I'm seeing on this screen here. So this is what it pulled out. Unfortunately, I also pulled out the bottom here, so I'm going to have to get rid of that. But as we press play down here, we can see it does its little rocking motion and opens up and goes there. You can see there's a bit of a glitch there with the texture, so I'm going to have to go in there and fix that. But apart from that, it has worked. I could import this into Unreal, and we will look at that in a different video. I've already got a few videos up on the channel that look at how to do that anyway, so you can follow those. But this will basically give you what you want. So I want you to have a go at this. This is the full assignment here, okay? It shouldn't take too long, but also I do understand that you are going to be learning it, but I do understand we don't have a lot of resources for Blender on our channel, so this is really just to help those who have chosen to use Blender, so that they can continue on with this assessment and get it through. We will probably find some glitches here and there, but we won't know until we get to that. So take what we have here, have a go, and I'll be really excited to see what you come up with. So good luck.